Every year, one dairy cow can fill 50 bathtubs with milk, roughly 10,000 liters, while a sheep barely fills half of one, and a reindeer produces less than that. That single gap in biology quietly rewrote the course of human history, and almost nobody stops to ask why you drink milk from a cow without a second thought. It's in your coffee, in your cereal, in the cheese on your pizza, in the butter on your bread. Cow's milk has become so embedded in global food culture that it barely registers as a choice anymore. It registers as a default. The same way egg means chicken egg and meat, in most contexts, effectively means beef or chicken. But here is the question almost nobody asks: why cow out of more than 5,000 species of mammals on this planet, every single one of them producing milk for their young? Why did one species of bovine become the universal dairy animal of the human race? And the deeper question, the one that actually gets interesting, is this: do we drink other animals' milk? Because it turns out we do, quite a lot of it. And the reasons some milks became global staples while others stayed regional secrets involve biology, economics, genetics, colonization, and a handful of quietly consequential decisions made by farmers in the Fertile Crescent thousands of years ago. Start with the biology, because milk is not one substance, it is a category. And within that category, the differences between species are staggering. Milk is produced by the mammary glands of female mammals to nourish offspring who cannot yet feed themselves, and evolution calibrates its exact composition to the specific needs of the specific infant drinking it. Human milk runs close to 7% lactose. Cow's milk sits nearer 4.8%. Seal milk is almost 50% fat, because a seal pup has to build a life-saving layer of blubber in freezing ocean water within days of being born. Whale milk follows the same logic. Every milk on Earth is a message written by evolution to one specific reader. And when humans drink a milk that wasn't written for us, our bodies notice, which brings us to the real hinge point of this story. Lactose. Lactose requires an enzyme called lactase to break down into sugars the gut can absorb. Every mammal infant produces it, but in most mammals, including most humans throughout most of history, lactase production shuts off after weaning, because keeping an unused enzyme running is a metabolic waste, which meant that for most of our species' existence, drinking milk as an adult didn't feel like a treat, it felt like punishment. Then, roughly 10,000 years ago, something strange happened inside certain human populations. A mutation near the lactase gene kept it switched on into adulthood. Suddenly, there were people who could drink fresh milk without consequence, and in places where dairy herds already existed, that mutation was a survival weapon. It spread like wildfire through northern Europe, where over 90% of people carry it today, while in East Asia it remains under 20%, and across sub-Saharan Africa, the picture splits sharply along old pastoral lines. High among cattle-herding groups like the Maasai, low among populations that farmed instead. This is not ancient history, this is evolution caught in the act. Humans and their animals reshaping each other in real time. Cattle bred for higher yields while their keepers were being rewritten at the genetic level to use what those cattle produced. But here's the twist almost nobody mentions. Lactase persistence wasn't the beginning of dairy, it was the result of it long before the gene spread widely. Humans were already living on milk, just not in liquid form. They were eating it as cheese and yogurt, foods where fermentation strips away most of the lactose before it ever reaches your gut. The cheese came first, the genetics came second, which means the story of dairy isn't really the story of a lucky mutation, it's the story of processing technology, quietly rewriting human biology from the outside. And so, which milks exactly made the cut? The list is larger than most people in the West assume, and stranger goats' milk trails cow's milk closely worldwide, and across much of the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and Africa. It's actually the more common choice, prized because its smaller fat globules sit easier on sensitive stomachs. Sheep's milk, nearly double the fat of cow's milk, rarely gets drunk fresh, but built entire cheese dynasties. Roquefort, Manchego, Pecorino Romano. Camel's milk sustains life across deserts where cattle simply die, carrying more vitamin C and a lower lactose load. Yak's milk, over 7% fat, fuels the butter tea that keeps people alive at altitudes where oxygen itself is scarce. Reindeer milk runs at a staggering 22% fat, so rich it behaves almost like cream straight from the animal water. Buffalo milk built the mozzarella tradition of southern Italy and outproduces cow's milk in parts of India And then there's the strangest one of all, mare's milk, fermented into a mildly alcoholic drink called kumis across the Central Asian steppe. A beverage the nomads of that region have relied on for millennia, made possible precisely because fermentation drains away the lactose that would otherwise leave most adults doubled over. Now, here's a question worth sitting with before we go further. If all of these milks exist, if some of them are richer, more nutritious, more efficient than the ones sitting in your fridge right now, why did the world converge so completely on a single species? I want to know what you think drives that kind of global convergence. Biology, economics, or pure historical accident? So drop your guess in the comments before I tell you the answer, because it might not be the one you expect. The truth is that cow's milk never won on nutrition. Sheep's milk beats it on protein, and fat camel's milk beats it on vitamin content. Donkey's milk, of all things, is structurally the closest of any commonly available animal milk to human breast milk itself, which is exactly why Roman and Greek elites once used it as a substitute for wet nurses. Cow's milk won on something colder and more mechanical. Volume. A high-yield dairy cow can produce 10,000 liters a year. A goat produces perhaps 800. A sheep barely clears 400 in the temperate farmland of early European agriculture, where cattle could graze on land unfit for crops and convert grass, something humans cannot digest, into a calorie-dense, storable food. That volume advantage was simply too large to compete with. It wasn't superiority, it was scale, and scale alone doesn't explain why we don't drink dozens of other milks that exist right now, unnoticed. In animals living beside us, lions produce rich, fatty milk. Nobody is milking a lion twice a day. Elephants produce milk, but a mother elephant with a calf is one of the most dangerous animals on the planet to approach. Moose have been tried repeatedly as dairy animals in Scandinavia, and moose milk is extraordinary, but moose refuse to cooperate at any meaningful scale. Zebras, close cousins of the horse, have resisted every serious domestication attempt in recorded history. Their temperaments simply incompatible with what turned wild horses into manageable herd animals. And kangaroos produce one of the most biochemically astonishing milks on Earth, chemically different from gland to feed joeys at different life stages simultaneously. Magnificent biology, completely irrelevant to a species that was never going to be fenced and milked. The animals humans do rely on for dairy share a narrow, specific cluster of traits: docility under management, willingness to keep producing beyond their own offspring's needs, tolerance of confinement, and volume worth the labor. That combination is rare. That's the entire reason the global dairy list is so short. And then came the final multiplier: history itself. Over the last 5 centuries, European colonial expansion didn't just move people and languages across the planet, it moved cattle, and with them, an entire agricultural worldview, into the Americas, into Australia, into regions of Africa and Asia that had their own dairy traditions, or none at all. What we now treat as a neutral, universal default, cow's milk in the fridge, cow's milk in the coffee, is in large part the residue of that expansion, a historical accident wearing the mask of inevitability. So the next time you pour milk into your coffee without a second thought, remember that somewhere in Central Asia right now, someone is drinking fermented mare's milk and thinking absolutely nothing unusual about it. And somewhere in Tibet, someone is doing the same with a cup of yak butter tea. If this kind of hidden history is the sort of thing that keeps your brain turning long after the video ends, subscribe, because there's a lot more of it still buried where nobody thought to look.